We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you, of course, recruiting. Official visit weekends. Oh, I mean, just in a groove now. Florida had their second one just past weekend. A big one coming up. We'll get into that one, too, before we sign off on this episode of Gators Breakdown. But the ebb and flows of it right now. We'll talk about the good. We'll talk about the bad. Everything in between right here. You know, Florida is making moves in some areas, and some other areas, not so much. But, of course, summertime, a lot of moves will be happening still. You know, plenty of some windows still left to hit for Florida. This coming up weekend is going to kind of be the big one, and then no more official visits after this weekend, and then probably more likely they don't happen this weekend. If they're going to take their official to Florida, have to wait till the fall. So we'll get into all that from the recent storylines. We'll even go back to last weekend as well, the first official visit weekend, cause some chain reaction news, I guess, coming from that weekend as well. So, of course, recruiting right here this time of year. But, hey, football, pure football on the horizon as well. Went out. The Athlon magazine is out. The Lindy's magazine is out. Just picked up the Athlon today. I hadn't even got a chance to really look at it yet. But you know what we do right here on Gators Breakdown when this preseason magazines come out. So, we'll be diving a deep dive into those as well. On the Athlon and the Lindy's. We already did Will Miles and Nick Knudsen, the Read and Reaction 2024 Gators preview out there. Father's Day is coming up. If you haven't picked that up yet, I certainly recommend Will and Nick's work there. Really good work. But, you know, now it's time for the national scene. We'll get into that soon on Gators Breakdown as well. So everybody hit that like button, subscribe right here on Gators Breakdown. If you're not subscribed yet, right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, do us a favor. Do us a favor, subscribe right there. But at the very least, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. That really, really helps us out. And of course, that merch at Gators Breakdown, merch.com, some new designs. Get your Beat Miami shirt, all the sunshine and the palm trees and the Gators look right there as well. And some swim trunks there for you as well. If you're into those kind of things, Gators Breakdown, merch.com to really help us out right here. And of course, help us out even more. Link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. You guys have heard the chats that we've been having lately. Oh, that's really good fun. So some chats there, extra episodes, ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown, all that good stuff. Link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. So, hey, everybody, yeah, I know it's been a little bit since I've gone live, you know, on YouTube a bit, trying to put the ads in. It has not cooperated with me, so I don't go live as much as I did just because of that part of it. So, if I have to, what may happen is I'll record live like I am now. If the ads give me some issues, I'll have to take this version down and re-upload it. But I wanted to come live to you tonight. I know it's been a bit coming at you live right here on Gators Breakdown. So everybody, Harrison, I know has been in here a good bit throughout the years. Chase, everybody else though, Brian, Matthew, Patrick, Ken's been following us for a long time as well. Good stuff. Everybody, thanks for hopping in live right here. Kind of impromptu episode. I didn't know when I was going to be able to get this episode out to you guys. A crazy weekend at my normal job, my 9 to 5 there at Channel 4. Crazy weekend, crazy day there. So had to deal with some, I guess, quote unquote, real life work. I get just break down real life work too, right? But the 9 to 5 job had to come first today. But everybody, yeah, thanks for hopping in live right here. But let's get into it. Of course, the big names. Let's start there. Let's start with the big names that were on campus this past weekend for Florida. Let's start with 5-star FSU offensive line commit Solomon Thomas. Of course, visited Florida this past week. He was the highlight of it. Heard his name throughout the last few months as a big-time flip prospect from Florida State to Florida. And, of course, Florida highlighting the experience of seeing life after football on this visit. And look, he's been to Florida many a times. He's seen the behind the scenes. He's seen the nuts and bolts. You know, this was more of the kind of a red carpet, you know, the official visits. You get that little red carpet feel to it. But also for Florida, the attack here was, you know, life after football. And then the culture side, he gets to see that one more time, does Solomon Thomas here. So, you know, despite his FSU commitment, he said Florida and LSU are neck and neck for him. He's praised Florida's pro-style approach, their people, their academic focus, and he's felt a strong connection with Florida's offensive line coaches, Rob Sale, Jonathan DeCoster, and, of course, head coach Billy Napier. Thomas plans to end his recruitment, conclude it. If anything's going to happen, certainly seems like he's saying, while I'm committed, I'm going to make a final decision by the end of the summer. Florida likes where they are here. And I still see this as more of a Florida versus Florida State battle in the end, just because of proximity to family. And it being here in Jacksonville and hearing it being close to his family is a big factor. That's the word from around here. Family is a huge factor. So that's why I end up seeing at Florida State. Can't count out LSU, of course, but I think it won't be that easy just to kind of chalk this one away to say, oh, it's just Florida State battle. But it is a huge factor in his recruitment. That's one reason I do see it end up being Florida State. But you can't forget about these SEC powers that come around for recruits as well. Of course, he was hosted by Roger Kearney from Orange Park, right nearby in Jacksonville as well. So good move by Florida, getting him involved and seeing all the other Jacksonville area recruits from the last few cycles. Sharif Denson, Grayson Howard, Marcus Burke, Trayon Webb. I mean, there's a good little nucleus of Jacksonville prospects that Billy Napier's been able to grab, put on this roster. And that's kind of helping here with Solomon Thomas as well. So it plays a part to recruit Thomas here to Gainesville. So there you go. He's also one to where I know he says he'd like a decision by the end of the summer. And I'll get into this too. I think this goes for a lot of prospects here. But they also want to see what Florida does this summer. He could come out at the end of summer and say, I'm going to stay committed to Florida State. But I do not think it's over if Florida goes out there and win some ball games this fall. And I think that goes for a lot of recruits out there. All right. Now, this one will surprise me a bit. But if you go back to last week, I'm not shocked at this. But I did put this out there of visit highs. And that seemed to be the case with wide receiver Caleb Cunningham from Mississippi. Go back to last week. He visited Auburn, come out of that Auburn visit, put the Tigers at the top of his recruitment. And then coming out of this past weekend, Cunningham has now put Florida as his 1B to his 1A for Auburn. So the SEC schools sit at the top here. And I brought up last week, these could be visit highs. And this recruitment, it has trended this way throughout the process. Just like last weekend and wide receivers, Florida DJ Lagway doing a good job of selling the prospect of playing together. That has been resonating with a few wide receiver recruits. But will it be enough in the end here? Florida definitely made up some ground, but you got upcoming visits to Tennessee and Alabama for Cunningham. Will they yield the same reaction? Will the visit highs be there as well? There's still some thought that he won't get out of the state of Mississippi as well, away from Mississippi State or Ole Miss. So good move by Florida to be up there. I mean, certainly what you like to hear coming out of a visit is, okay, well, great visit at Auburn last week. Florida's right up there. But will that continue? Will he visit Tennessee and it's going to be the same thing? Will he visit Alabama and the same things are being said? So while I think Florida's in good shape right now, what would that look like down the road? One more 5-star that was on campus. That was safety Trey McNutt from Ohio. He did give the Florida visit a 10, so that is a step in the right direction, but hard to know what that means right now. Family is big for him. His dad also played at Ohio State in the early 2000s. Seems like it's a tough pull for me from the state of Ohio. Florida's hosted twice, shared that he could play all over the secondary and play early. Florida's battling Ohio State, USC, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Georgia, among others. So I think we all knew that coming in from this weekend, that the 3 5-stars that were on campus this past weekend, Solomon Thomas is still the most likely, I think, coming out of this group. Not saying that will happen, just putting him in this group with these guys. He's the most likely out of the 5-stars that were just here and will probably be here. I mean, Solomon Thomas, as far as 5-stars goes, even though he's committed to FSU, still one of the more likely 5-stars that could be in this class of 2025 for the Gators. Big thanks, Tony. I'm assuming that's Agalini right there. Thanks for hopping in, Lucas. You too, man. Tony says sponsored by Sandals. Okay, yeah, that will be next week, by the way. So vacation Dave next week. So let's keep it going right here. One big move from the weekend, and one I love absolutely hearing because of the legacy. Ben Hanks Jr. Now let me tell you. Now coming into this, I wasn't really expecting much. I was expecting this much of a positive review from Hanks and his camp because it had been Miami. That had been the school that kind of maybe held the early lead, maybe be trending for the South Florida prospect. But the Gators did a lot of good work on this one, putting in the work this past, of course, not just this past weekend, but hosting in this official visit, and it went a long way here. Of course, he's a top target for the Gators at the cornerback position. His visit included, of course, going to Spurrier. See Spurrier in town. They go to Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Of course, his father goes with him, and his father played with Steve Spurrier, of course, Ben Hanks. And, of course, I think that's probably a cool thing to see for the son being in that situation, seeing his father with his old head coach. But Hanks Jr., of course, a top 100 overall recruit nationally. Florida staff worked hard to persuade him, emphasizing his potential in their defense and that he belongs in the orange and blue. Will Harris, the cornerbacks coach for the Gators, the DB coach for the Gators, hitting that home. Now, of course, legacy doesn't automatically mean that he's going to come to Florida as well, but certainly a spin here that you basically say, man, you got orange and blue in your blood. Come to Gainesville. Let's continue that. So Hanks Jr. does plan to return to campus. He intends to commit before the season, he says. And the efforts here from Florida really went a long way. This one was, I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure where this one was going to go this weekend, but asking around from a couple of angles here, positive mojo for this one right now for Florida. So if I would have made a mock last week, he probably wouldn't have been on it. I still don't know if he'd be on it now, but I'd feel better about it. I would certainly, I might write it in pencil. I might write it in pencil if I was to do one right now. So he says Florida's up there with Georgia, Florida State, and Miami for his remaining summer officials. And, of course, decide before his senior season. So from what I can gather, Florida did really good work in getting in further with this one. If you go back to his last season, in 2023, he was all-dayed 2M, 1M selection by the Miami Herald. He finished his junior campaign at Booker T. Washington with 38 tackles, 6 interceptions, 3 pick sixes, 3 blocked field goals, and a fumble return for a touchdown. So Hanks Jr. making plays all over there in South Florida. So let's continue with some of the good feelings here from this past weekend. Won't really go in order of kind of the hierarchy of player rankings here, but predictions started to come in over the weekend for Florida to flip 3-star linebackers Miles Johnson from Alabama. The Crimson Tide's news staff hasn't really been in contact much with Johnson in quite some time, so that is certainly playing a factor here, and the fact that also Florida is making him a priority, and that showed over the weekend. Ole Miss is also getting a visit, and that's scheduled, but Florida is a school trending here for Johnson with Ron Roberts, Austin Armstrong, and Cannon Gibbs pushing the right buttons here. So, a tricky one here. He's been committed to Alabama. New staff comes in. Not as much communication with Kalen DeBoer and that staff. So we'll see where that one goes. If a commitment is imminent, will he wait till that Ole Miss visit? We'll see here and what that means for Miles Johnson. But certainly visit goes good over the weekend. On 3 with their predictions. I think it was Corey and Keith putting their predictions in there. So good work by them. But you started, even from the Alabama side, if you were flirting on social media over the weekend, I forgot what account it was, but it was from the Alabama side, the first place I saw it, that they were putting in a prediction for the flip from Johnson from Bama to Florida. Let's keep it going with the targets that Florida made a move for. And another would be 3-star tight end Hollis Davidson from the state of Georgia. The former Auburn commit raved about his visit and his relationship with tight end coach Russ Callaway, of course, the offensive coordinator for the Gators as well. And that seems to be what is moving this in the right direction for the Gators. Davidson is a big option at the position, 6'6", 230 pounds. Florida, Auburn, FSU, and Georgia are the main programs involved at this time. He will officially visit the Bulldogs next weekend and then FSU on the 21st weekend. So additionally, he might visit Auburn at some point as well. He said he doesn't have a list, but admits Florida is high on his radar. So after hosting, and I think the interesting move here is Florida did a lot of good work here. And after hosting 2 tight end prospects last week, of course, with Tayshawn Gelsey from Jacksonville and Micah Jones from Mississippi, someone may need to make a move soon. Florida's looking to take 2 tight ends. You made some good moves with 2 tight ends the last weekend's visit, and then this past weekend, the move here. So only 2 players. Florida looking to take 2 tight ends at the spot, but have done well in recruiting all 3 of these options that we just discussed. 4-star Andrew Olish was on campus too this past weekend, but doesn't seem to be much movement from the Pennsylvania product. That's looking like a Penn State-Michigan battle. But Florida making major moves here, of course, this weekend for Hollis Davidson. So might be three targets for 2 spots right now. Could we see him move soon for one of those spots? All right. 4-star interior offensive lineman Micah DeBose from the state of Alabama does have Florida in his top 3, but he also has LSU and Alabama in that group. LSU is the school to be trending with a trip to Ohio State coming up this weekend. DeBose is another offensive lineman that likes the offensive line coach setup that Florida has, but I don't think that'll be enough to pull this one in Florida's direction for the 6'5", 315-pound offensive lineman. It sounds like a solid plan for a July 4th commitment date. And then another interior offensive lineman on campus was 3-star John Mills from California. Florida closed the gap with Texas in this recruitment, but hard to know what that really means because Mills has his Austin visit coming up this weekend. So Texas was trending coming in. Florida closed that gap. Even if it was close to 50-50 right now, what does that visit to Texas mean this weekend? The visit went great for the Gators, but Texas has been trending all the way. That visit still has to happen, of course. So Florida pushing the buttons to get into this one. One big thing here, they got Jake Slaughter involved here to hang out with him, and he mentioned how much they have in common. So big, that was a big addition right there, and kind of the life off the field aspect. All the programs that Florida has off the field, like Gator Made as well. That was another button pressed here that really went a long way in Austin Mills and Florida closing that gap with Texas. Hopefully, that is enough to kind of stymie whatever Texas can pull up this weekend. But we all saw the videos last weekend, right? And Harrison, there you go. You read my mind. I was about to say it, but y'all see all the Lambos at Texas. Yeah, Lamborghini galore at Texas in their official visit. There were recruits coming into their facility and lined up Lamborghini after Lamborghini after Lamborghini. So, hey, there you go. That's college football recruiting now, by the way. It is crazy. But do what you got to do to get these kids in, I guess. Let's see. 4-star. Let's see. Let me go back. We're going to start with some wide receiver talk here. And I know if I can, we already talked Cunningham, of course. Cortez Mills is coming up, but Chase Wester said he needs some good news on wide receivers, anything. A little bit of early good news earlier in the episode here with Cunningham. But Chase, we got some later good news as well, but not necessarily so with Cortez Mills. 4-star wide receiver from Homestead says the Gators are still one of his top programs and at the top of his list, and Florida's selling him on being able to have the chance to be moved around in this offense, inside and outside at the receiver spot in this Florida offense. Miami may seem to be the leader here. That's the thought, but Mills will officially visit Oklahoma on June 14th and Miami on June 21st. Previously made an official to Nebraska. Mills plans to announce a commitment in early July, with him stating all schools are equal right now. But most people think if there was a pick right now, it would be Miami, but he's saying all the schools are equal. Jacaleb Falk, 4-star edge from Alabama, was on his official as well as an Auburn commit, but hard to see him getting away from Auburn for me at this point. Bama, Florida make up his top 3 along with the Tigers. the Gators see him as an inside backer, even though he's listed as an edge on the recruiting services. So there you go. Getting you caught up with this past weekend. So some movement there for the Gators, making some moves for those 5 stars. I don't know if they're making their decisions anytime soon for Florida. Florida's in those, got themselves in those a bit more, especially for Cunningham and Thomas. We'll see what that means there in the end. But let's go back to last weekend. And I guess 2 weekends ago, but I know I say this past weekend and last weekend, that might be confusing, but all right, let's go back to not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And those visitors for some good news and some bad news. So let's start with the potential good news. And we were just talking about, hey, Chase, you needed some good wide receiver news. Well, hopefully this is good enough for you. Wide receiver Nashawn Montgomery. He took his visit to Florida last weekend, has an upcoming visit to LSU this weekend, and then Penn State the next. Now, there were some predictions from Home 3 in favor of the Gators eventually getting a commitment from the Miami Central wide receiver. He is likely to make a commitment before the season starts. We go back to his visit weekend. Montgomery mentioned a positive interaction with Gators quarterback DJ Lagway, of course, who expressed interest in having Montgomery as his ex-receiver. Montgomery believes he has a good developmental potential in Gainesville, and as the staff told him he can line up inside and outside and even in the backfield. So Gators, Napier, Gonzalez, Decker offering that versatility of a playmaker right here to Montgomery. But the Gators have made him a priority so far. We'll see if any other of these upcoming visits sway this another way. But some predictions coming in for Nashawn Montgomery, 4-star wide receiver from down in South Florida. Now, the bad news, Zaire Addison commits to Oregon, one of the top offensive tackles in the country. Kind of just commits to Oregon out of nowhere. Just a week after he visited Florida. And, there was some thought out there that Florida was really in this one. This was pretty unexpected as far as the timeline goes, though. Credit to Oregon for pushing the right buttons. But even if it wasn't going to be Florida, now this one's still a surprise as far as the timeline goes, him committing to Oregon this soon. But, kind of, if you look at Florida right here, this is the second time something like this has happened with a big Gator target going to a West Coast school, from the state of Florida. Gator target goes to a West Coast school, then comes out of nowhere with a commitment. Remember this kind of happening with safety Hilton Stubbs out of Jacksonville Mandarin, him visiting USC, didn't really think much about it, comes out of that visit to USC and commits. And he was heavily trending Florida, way more so than Addison and Florida there. So now I'm not so sure Addison and Florida would have, ever happened after his visit to Gainesville last week, but still surprised that Addison pulled the trigger this soon, just in general, not necessarily looking at it from a Florida perspective. And he was trending Florida, or Florida was going to get him after coming out of that visit last weekend. Not so sure that was going to happen for Florida anyway, but still surprised he pulled the trigger this soon. So there we go. That was kind of the good news, bad news of this past weekend. Harrison says, when I saw the picture of Addison and Phil Knight, I knew we were in trouble. Saw that as well. Still didn't think much of it at the time, though. As you said, you could have thought Florida would have been in trouble a bit. I still didn't think he'd come out of that visit committing. But it is. That's what happened. All right, but Florida can make it up this weekend. Let me pull it up here. And, of course, the visits this coming up week for the Gators. And kind of goes back to last week. Once Abdullah decommitted from Florida, we at least looked at the wide receiver board. And we knew we would, besides Cunningham this past weekend, we were looking forward to this coming up weekend for the Gators. And it's, of course, loaded, especially at the receiver spot for the Gators. So now, 5-star Dallas Wilson, committed to Oregon right now. There's some thought if he was going to flip from Oregon, it would be Miami. But I'm telling you, Florida is as much in it as Miami is for the flip, if it happened. I'm not saying a flip will happen, but if it does, Florida's in it just as much as Miami is. So Dallas Wilson, 5-star wide receiver, on campus this weekend. Of course, Vernell Brown III on campus. Florida's firmly in that one as well. The thought he's coming off of Ohio State visit last weekend, and then the thought of a Florida State in-state battle. You don't want to discount Ohio State, of course, but most people think he'll stay in-state, and it end up being a Florida State battle for Vernell Brown III. So that's your highlights of this coming up weekend. Now, there's some thought now that C.J. Ingram will not visit this weekend after he's kind of been moving first it was 2 weekends ago, then it was last weekend at one point, or no, 2 weekends ago, and then that it would be this coming up weekend for C.J. Ingram. Now, he may not be visiting this weekend either. So we'll see what there's a deep receiver board for Florida right now. This one's tricky because he is a legacy, and he's going to be doing that. If he comes to Florida as a receiver, he'd be coming so as converting from a quarterback spot. And we just went over some wide receiver names. Montgomery, getting some predictions to flip for Florida. The good news from Cunningham this past weekend. And then, as I just mentioned, Dallas Wilson visiting this weekend. Vernell Brown III visiting this weekend. I mean, Florida's got a deep wide receiver board. Donovan Olegbode is also from IMG going to be on campus this weekend as well. A 4-star wide receiver who I really like. So there's a lot of options. Would you reach and take a guy who has it, even though he's a legacy? With Ingram playing quarterback, would you take him over while you got this deep wide receiver board right now over any of these other names? I think you probably got to wait and see how it plays out there. And no reaches here. I know. I mean, I'd love for him to be in orange and blue, but if spots are at a premium now with the way the transfer portal works. I mean, you're not going to be taking 25 high school commitments anymore. You might be taking 18 to 20 high school now, so spots are even more so at a premium. You're going to leave room for the transfer portal. Now, of course, you got to see how roster movement works down the road, but that could be part of the plan. Q Lee says make him a tight end. I wouldn't be completely opposed to that either. So we're just got to have to see how that one plays out. But yeah, I mean, there's your receivers. We talked about it last week. Go back and listen to last week's episode. Plenty of big time wide receivers on the board. Got to make a move for them starting. Well, not necessarily starting. We've already started that. But the big names, I mean, the three this weekend, Wilson, Vernell Brown III, and Olegbode, I mean, that was 3 of the 4 Florida wanted. I'd sign me up right now. I think we all would take that. But Wilson, I do think it's going to be tough for that Oregon flip. But Vernell Brown III, I think we've all heard Florida's in some good shape right now. Olegbode, I think Florida's in good shape there as well. Hilton Stubbs, just mentioned him as a surprise USC commit from a couple of months ago when everything was trending Florida. He'll be on campus for his official visit this weekend. And that was also in question. When would he take it? Would he take his during the season, come for a game? But he can do that anytime. Or would he take it during the summer? He'll be on campus for his official visit this weekend. He's also one that it's going to take a good season for Florida. Florida's going to have to show it on the field. Even if he flipped this summer for Florida and Florida goes on to have a bad season, hopefully not, but if Florida went on to have a bad season, Hilton Stubbs is not going to stay committed to Florida. Don't get me wrong. I'd certainly celebrate him committing to Florida right now, and then you go on to win some games, and okay, you cement it. But right now, if he was to commit, I mean, he's going to be looking at Florida this fall and what happens, as we know many guys are. One of my favorite players in the class, Tavion Wallace, linebacker from Jessup, Georgia. Not far. It's about 2.5 hours north of Jacksonville. So they're in Wayne County. Florida State have thought to be leading this one for so long, and I've tried to get some info on this one. We know his dad grew up a Gator fan. Got a Gator truck that's just been, a truck that's just been paraphernalia like crazy in Gator garb and stickers and magnets or whatever. But anyway, a Gator themed truck for his dad. That's how big of a Gator fan his dad is. So he grew up in that situation. FSU jumped on him early, offered early. Here in Florida's in this one pretty close as well. If you had to ask me, if I think he had to choose right now, I think FSU would probably be the pick. That's why this weekend's visit is huge for Tavion Wallace, one of the best linebackers in the country. Don't count out Georgia either. Don't count out the in-state Bulldogs, of course, for any defender, I mean, any player, honestly, but any high-ranking defender in the country in the state of Georgia, of course. Ty Jackson, on 3's number 1 linebacker in the country. He was supposed to visit FSU, or it was the thought he was going to visit FSU this weekend. He shoves that visit and is going to visit Gainesville this weekend. So, Tavion Wallace and Ty Jackson. I mean, that would be up there with last year's Miles Graham, Aaron Childs Hall, somehow. And I'm thinking big here. I'll admit it. But you can back that up with Wallace and Jackson. Woo. 2 classes in a row. Be a big, really good linebacker haul. And would certainly have Ron Roberts coming in, leading that group with 2 big names right away. Lagarza Hayward, 4-star safety. He'll be on campus, but his visit's coming. I forgot. He said, I think he said a decision date soon. Florida's in it, I think, along with Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia. Tennessee had thought to be trending for a little while for Hayward. I think Georgia's trending now, and that one after a visit to Athens last weekend. Harrison does bring up a good point. He's not on the list to visit, but Christian Gass had already visited Gainesville this summer, but certainly in play for him as well in that linebacker group. So, Gass, I'd say trending probably towards Florida as it stands right now. You pair him with just one of Wallace and Jackson, I'm happy. Somehow, 2 out of 3 of that group, I'm good. I'm good. Malik Autry, of course, the Auburn commit. Like Florida a little early there, even though he was committed to Auburn, but hadn't really heard much positive traction for Florida lately in that one. Maybe the official visit changes some stuff as far as that one goes. As I mentioned, Donovan Olegbode will be on campus. And then Tavares Dice, another Auburn commit, an offensive tackle, was questionable if he was going to visit this weekend or not. He is going to. He announced it on social media, I saw today. So Tavares Dice, and look, the big thing about him was, just talked about losing an offensive lineman as far as Zaire Addison goes. And now you get Tavares Dice, 4-star offensive tackle, as I mentioned, from Georgia, committed to Auburn. You get him on campus this weekend. So hopefully his name has been brought up that, Florida has done some good work there. Hopefully that can continue with an official visit this week. Bryce Fitzgerald, safety out of down south in Miami. I've heard some good things about him. Earlier on in the process, not so much lately. We'll see where Florida stands for him coming out of this visit this weekend. Waltez Clark, of course, to commit for Florida at running back. There was some talks about him last week, of course, and maybe some interest in Central Florida. And I think he came out and said, I'm not going to visit Central Florida. I will be in Gainesville, not planning a visit to UCF. The list for this weekend has changed a bit. Dalen Upshaw brought him up last week as we talked receivers. He's not going to visit Gainesville this weekend now. Antonio Branch, Mal Waldrop as well to go along with CJ Ingram we talked about earlier on. So there you go. Getting you caught up on recruiting right now. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at, getting you caught up. Now, if, of course, anything happens, I'm recording this on Monday. A lot can change in the next few days, so don't hold this episode to gospel right now. We know how visits can happen or won't happen, but that's the way, as we record here on a late Monday, where everything is kind of trending right now. So Sean Abel says, if Sale can sign Solomon, I'll gladly eat crow for that accomplishment. Yeah, I certainly would love to see just, as we have some big targets on offensive line, of course, You've had some good ones, but we're looking for the 5 stars, looking for the near the top group of offensive linemen. Haven't been able to pull that kind in yet. Let's see. Thanks for hopping in, everybody, though. Harrison says, incredible that we are even in play for Wilson, Cunningham, and VB3. Yeah, certainly. I mean, I just think when it's all said and done, we don't know when decisions from these guys will come. ultimately. Now, some are going to be there in the summer, and we know that already. But what is a good season? I mean, say Graham Mertz, Elijah Badger, Trey Wilson, DJ Lagway to an extent, since that's the quarterback they'll be playing with. Go out there and light it up. If they've already made decisions, will that change decisions? If they haven't made the decisions, can that tilt the decision into Florida's, wheelhouse? Hopefully. But there's a lot that really has to play out. I think these guys are really in wait and see mode. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, there is legit interest in Florida. But some guys are going to hold off on commitments, are going to hold off on flips. They may commit elsewhere to get a spot now, to save their spot somewhere else. But if Florida could win this fall, I can see someone making the jump. I don't expect this summer to be full of big names. There might be a big name or two, but with most of them coming later, if they do. But I do think, of course, for multiple reasons, we know this is a big season for Billy Napier and this staff. And get some confidence in the program. A lot of that confidence can translate itself onto the recruiting trail. All right. There we go. I'll answer that question. But this was mostly a recruiting episode. But yeah, since Lee sent it in, Dave, in your opinion, would this be the best O-line we've had in a long time? It certainly should be. I know Pro Football Focus last week put Florida's offensive line at number 10 in the country. Yes, you heard that right. If you didn't see it, Pro Football Focus did have Florida's offensive line number 10 in the country. Now, they are big on the tackles, I do know, from their previous stops of Devin Manuel, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon. They are high on Jake Slaughter at center. Now, I just think, coming out of spring, we just have the same questions that we had. What can happen at guard? Can Najee Harris step up in his second year? Damian George sliding inside now. Caden Jones, competition there at the right guard spot for him. I like Jake Slaughter at center. And then at tackle, just mentioned the transfers. Them in spring going through all the reps they had to go to because of the injuries to Austin Barber, because of the injuries to Cam Waits. To me, that is a blessing in disguise. Austin Barber knows this offense. He may have to go in the fall camp and knock the rust off, but he knows this offense. He's going to create a really good battle at the offensive tackle spot with Devin Manuel. And on the right side, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon and Cam Waits. And that's going to be a battle there as well. I think it was a blessing in disguise for those transfers to get all the reps in spring and go create a battle that makes Florida better along the offensive line. I do like the transfers, what they brought in. I do think the floor is higher. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were last year. How much better can they be? That's the question. How much can they give Graham Mertz the time to take those downfield shots that we want to see in this offense? Open up some run lanes for Montrell Johnson and the crew. Yes, I do think they will be better. With that schedule, they're going to have to be a lot better. They're going to have to take the necessary steps. I think there is the potential there. Now, I don't think there's going to be no all-world offensive line. I still think there's too many questions there. But certainly with the system in place and the way Billy Napier wants to run the ball, if that is there, the rest of the offense is going to open up. But got to give Graham, if they want to take those deep shots that we saw last year. There were times they were called, and either Graham Mertz wouldn't let it go or didn't have time to let it go. Got to shore that up. All right. Good stuff, guys. Thanks for hopping in. As I said, this kind of surprise live episode. Of course, I was going to do an episode anyway on this topic, but glad I could do it live. As I said, may not be the original link when you come out. I'll see how YouTube treats this one, but some good stuff here. Of course, probably back later this week with some kind of episode. We'll see. It might be maybe a preview of the preview magazines, the summer magazines. We'll see there. But yeah, or some more recruiting talk. Might be half and half. Who knows? Plenty of time for an episode though. Later on this week here on Gators Breakdown. So that'll do it for this episode. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, Thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.